It is my privilege and joy that we can start a new Bible study about managing for the Master. And the subtitle today is Part of God's Family. In order to understand the role of a manager, the role of the one who administrates the good of God, we need to understand His creation and the way things work in His creation. So God is always active. He is industrious. He has created everything in His image. And we can see that when He created the flower, He gave the flower a purpose. And what is that purpose? When He created the birds, He gave them a purpose. And when He made man, in what does man find his purpose? So there must be something that binds them all together, and that is to serve the greater good, to serve the common good, the good of the whole universe. Because God made all things to do something, to have a purpose. Existence itself is no purpose. Because if something exists and doesn't serve anything, it is thrown away. Like He said about the salt. If salt is not tasty anymore, you can do nothing anymore with it. You have to throw it away. So He made that everything should serve in the great circuit of the universe for the common good. So He made everything to work like a channel because it is all bound together on each other. And He put it all to serve under the law. Nothing can exist or function by itself. It must take first, but nothing can do anything for itself. It must give, it must serve the purpose. If we understand this, that God made things to serve, not for itself. This is the opposite of what our heart is doing. Our heart is searching everything for itself. But the law and the way God has created everything is exactly the other way around. So there must be an input, an entrance, and an output. There must be a cause and an effect. And everything works in a circuit in which God is the beginning and the end of the circuit. He is the creator of all things, and so He is the cause of all things. Everything we see in nature are effects. They must have a cause. And God is the cause. But for a cause, there cannot be no cause. Because if for the cause there would be a cause, it would be an effect. So here we need the understanding of the law. Because if we have all effects that we see and have no cause, then the law does not exist. But we know it's not possible that to have an effect without a cause. Just for the cause, you have no cause. And that's why God remains the cause. He can never be an effect. And we are the effects. We can never be a cause. So, understanding this, we know that all must be bound together in its existence, in a dependency on each other, which are in the same channel. So in Desire of Ages, page 20, paragraph 2, it says, "Even now all created things declare the glory of His excellence. There is nothing save the selfish heart of man that lives unto itself. No bird that cleaves the air, no animal that moves upon the ground, but ministers to some other life. There is no leaf of the forest or lowly blade of grass, but has its ministry. Every tree and shrub and leaf pours forth that element of life without which neither man nor animal could live. And man and animal in turn minister to the life of tree and shrub and leaf. The ocean itself, the source of all our springs and fountains, receives the streams from every land, but takes to give." Looking unto Jesus, we see that it is the glory of our God to give. "I do nothing of myself," said Christ. "The living Father has sent me, and I live by the Father." So here we have the first part of the law. He cannot exist by itself. He can do nothing from himself. He must first take those things from his Father. But he says, I seek not my own glory, but the glory of him that sent me. I am not doing things for my own, but I'm doing it for my Father's sake. In these words, he set forth the great principle, which is the law of life for the universe. When God helped me to see this law, it brought clearance in my mind. It is that thing that I enjoy most because it gives me stability and it shows me what can be true and what cannot be true. I read further, all things Christ received from God, but he took to give. So in the heavenly courts, in his ministry of all created beings, through the beloved Son, the Father's life flows out to all. Through the Son, it returns in praise and joyous service, a tide of love to the great source of all. And thus, through Christ, the circuit of beneficence is complete, representing the character of the great giver, the law of life. This we must understand. It is most important if we want to ever understand the theme that we have for this quarter, to be a manager or an administrator of God's goods, or any other biblical subject, without understanding this basic law, we are totally lost. So it gives us it is the key for all understanding. So everything works in a circuit we have seen, and I took here an electrical circuit, and for an electrical and for every circuit, you need a supply of power that starts and ends the function. And that is in a circuit that needs a battery, the battery. If not, it's electrical current from another source, but that's the principle. You need a starting point and a finishing point. And so it is also more, you need not only this as a starting point and the beginning point, but you need a coordinator of that power. Most people think that the law coordinates itself. They don't see that the law is just a channel through which God coordinates everything in his universe. So even if the circuit is set, it needs to be coordinated. And I take the example of the human being. We have a blood circulation, a blood circuit, which starts in the heart and finishes in the heart. But this needs to be coordinated. It does not work by itself. It must work under the coordination of someone, that then when I run, it beats faster, and when I stop, it beats slower. So we need to understand the coordination of the process. The digestive system is a circuit. It needs to be coordinated in order to function. And of course, the reproductive circuit, we know that very nicely in the woman body, how it works. It needs to be coordinated, because then when this is, it gives some difficulties in the cycle, in the hormone cycle of the woman, then we see the bleeding, we see things. So someone needs to coordinate that. And that coordination can only be a spirit. And under the guidance of the Spirit of man, things in our body work. And this is important to understand also, to see the coordination, how things in the wider circle function. So God has put in the micro and the macrocosmos the same principles, the same way how things work. And so looking from this perspective of the human being as the spirit coordinating everything, we want to look to our earth and to the way and the purpose why God created man. We read in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. So, in order to supply with power the earth that he finished to create, God said, I need a switch. I need a coordinator who coordinates this circle that he established, who brings in the power that is needed that all things should work well. So he said, let us create man in our own image. Because God coordinates everything, so man should coordinate the powers for this earth, the supply for the earth. This is a very important thing. We always reduce the Bible text in our understanding just to the way we look as God has made us in his image. But we forget that function is even more important than how something looks. Yes, looks good, but function is important because God is putting everything into function in this universe, and he gave man a responsibility in this same way to coordinate, to bring in this coordination on this earth, and to hang up the whole earth in this one switch. So the circuit of the earth was made dependent on the human. That's why he was to reign. It was not that he should reign over them in the way we understand it today, but in order to supply their needs. So he was there to be for the birds of the air, for the cattle, for the animals, for the plants, for the fishes in the sea, and all the fruit he would bring back to God. So in this way, man was made to be the beginning, the switch, the coordinator of life on earth. What a privilege, what a great purpose that was. What a responsibility he gave to man, to be the switch for the supply of the whole earth. So we know that by an inexplicable self-deception, man thought he could become a god. The switch thought he might be a source. So if the switch thinks it's a source, it's not just a coordinator, but thinks belong to itself, then when Adam and Eve deceived themselves, they separated, of course, from the source of life, and now they are the God. Now things belong to them. They don't see that they are disconnected, but they had disconnected from the source of supply. And since on them the whole earth was dependent, when they deceived themselves, and as a result they ate from the forbidden tree, they died. But not only them. The whole earth was sentenced to death because life is no longer possible. Under these circumstances, everything must decay. And when that supply that God has put there would come to an end, every living thing would die. This is the terrible thing that happened to humanity. That Adam lost his administrative function, his function as a manager, as a coordinator of things on the earth. And it's only because of him that the animals must die. It's only because of him that we see decay now for 6,000 years. It is not because they do any mistakes or can do mistakes, no. It is just because the coordinator, the manager, destroyed everything. He became a slave of Satan. And would have remained so if God would have not brought a solution, a plan of salvation that he made even before man fell. Solution was that God should give his Son to become a human, to add humanity to his divinity, to enter the life of Adam in order to destroy in himself that nature that destroys, that binds us as slaves to Satan. And when Jesus cried out on the cross, it is finished, and sinful nature was destroyed, then the power of Satan was taken away. Some people think they have to fight with an external Satan. No. The external Satan exists, but he has no power over us because it is not him that binds us to himself, but we bind ourselves to him through this deception that we are born with. That's why we have to get rid of the deception. And when we get rid of the deception, we have overcome Satan. But we're overcoming inside of us because we stop binding us to him. Because it is us that binds us to the devil. Because of this terrible deception. So understanding that is very important. Because we have not an outside battle. We have not to fix the things outside of us. We must first fix the things in us. And we are only overcomer over the evil by destroying that by which we inherited by birth, that binds us to Satan. So Jesus separated that. He made us free. And he resurrected as a child of God. And so he connected heaven and earth again, because he became that coordinator, that switch that connects again the supply of the earth to God. It does not make the earth here anew, but it made life again possible. And one day when the earth will be renewed, because all that is born on this earth must die, because it cannot exist, because it once was separated, and it cannot be bound again. But in the new creation, then life will be possible for every being, because nothing will ever interrupt that circle of beneficence. All switches will be clear and will know that they are there for coordination, not for being the owner, for being the rulers in the way of ownership over things. So God offers this solution to every human being. Every individual on earth can become a child of God, to enter the family of God. But he will only enter the family of God as he will see his issue and his need to become a child of God. So that's why we can take that place. We can enter the life of Christ, become a right switch, and become a manager of the entrusted goods of God. If we remain in the deceptive nature, we will only destroy things. We won't make them grow. We won't make them multiply, but we will destroy them. Like Jesus gives this example in the parable of the prodigal son. I want to read with you this parable because it is that what helps us to understand the family of God and how things are made to function. So let us read from Luke 15 from verse 11. And he said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed the swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave him it to him. And when he came to himself, he said, "How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants." And he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said unto him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son." But the father said to his servants, "Bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet, and bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat and be happy. For this my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost, and is found." And they began to marry. They began to be happy. Now his elder son was in the field, and as he came and drew nigh to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of his servants and asked what these things meant. And he said unto him, "Thy brother is come, and thy father hath killed the fatted calf, because he had received him safe and sound." And he was angry, and would not go in. Therefore came his father out, and entreated him. And in answering said to his father, "Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment. And yet thou never gavest me a kid, that I might make merry with my friends," to be happy with his friends. "But as soon as this thy son was come, which has devoured thy living with harlots, thou hast killed for him the fatted calf." And he said unto him, "Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make happy and be glad. For this thy brother was dead, and is alive again, and was lost, and is found." So, we know this parable very well, and there are many lessons we can draw from here. But just a few to see the administration parts. Both sons were from the father. And in the whole context of the story, we see that both sons lived for themselves. They only cared for themselves. So the younger one said, "I want to have my portion and be on my own." And he took the portion that God gave it to him, and the young man wasted everything that God has given him. Was wasted. Now, what can be done for him? How can he be rescued? He had to come into difficult times. He had to end up with the swine to see his condition. And the Bible says when he came to his mind, he remembered who he was. Friends, this is the issue. He remembered who he was. And he said, "I will go home to my father. Yes, I have no, how can I say, I cannot be his son anymore. I have no expectations that he should take me as a son, but for sure, he might take me as a servant. And still as a servant, I would have enough to eat." And when the father saw him away off, he came and he did not accept the son's request, but said, "He is my son." And the father, who is faithful to both of his sons, gives this prodigal son the coat. He puts in a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet because he is a son. And he declares him now being alive. He said he was dead and he's alive. Now, when was he dead? When he left? or before he left? Well, we know that these are the people that are born on this earth. There might be just Cain and Abel. There might be just the example of the older and the younger one. The younger, like Cain, understands his issue and brings the right sacrifice. And has become a child of God. He entered from death to life. This younger son goes through difficult times, and he must come to the end of all his powers so that he might realize his need and his deception. And so then he can go home and become from a dead son a living son. This is a beautiful thing how God explains us redemption. From born death, we become alive through coming back to where we are belonging, to our Father in heaven. All this was done through Christ, as we have seen before. Now, when a person is under difficult situations, he might see his need and come back. But he still needs to go through that process of understanding his nature. And obviously this guy understands his nature and his need for a new life. And the Father gives it to him. And his joy is not restrained. They come together and they feast. But when the older son comes home, he is not happy at all. When he hears that it is his brother that the feast was made for, he cannot accept that. I mean, how can it be? He who never transgressed the commandments of God, he who always was faithful to his father, should not get the reward that he was working for. Not once, he says, you gave me a little kid of a calf to have my friends together and do a party. And the father was amazed, at least in the parable. He says, my son, you're always with me. We are one. He says, all that I have is thine. Now, don't deceive yourself further. Come in and let us be joyous, because this thy brother was dead. And I might say he tells it to him. You are also dead. And by coming in, you become alive. You become, in reality, a child of God. You enter the family of God. These are the two classes of humans. I could say religious humans, but we could expand it on all people on earth. The one that are wasting the goods of God by a not good coordination and administration. And they enter to see their problem. And the others just do everything correctly, like Nicodemus, like the rich young ruler, like Paul before his conversion. They all thought that they are okay. Which are more difficult to be saved? Obviously, those who think they do all correctly. That's why it's so hard to explain to a religious person that it is sin that makes him sick. Because he believes sin is a choice. He believes that sin, he could avoid it. He doesn't see. In his sinful nature, this man could not avoid to waste everything. Because if you use things for yourself, they are wasted. But even this other son who was looking good, looks like he didn't waste, he still was wasting. He still was wrong because he was not living by love to his Father. He was not living in the law of life. He was living in deception. And the Father gave him the principle, everything that is mine is also yours. And I want in our studies that we have to go into this offer of God that says everything that is mine is also yours. We are one. If we are the family of God, if we are members of the family of God, it's evident that everything is also ours. But how do we manage it? Not becoming the owners of it in the way of deception and of our terrible selfish nature. So I pray that we might have a very beneficial study in understanding how to manage, how to be a coordinator of God's good and finish His work, because the time is at hand. Amen.